So we're going to take a look at how we can solve real-world scenario equations with systems of equations. So I'm going to read this first one where we have Ace Car Rental rents cars for X dollars per day plus Y dollars for each mile driven. Carlos rented a car for 4 days, drove it 160 miles, and spent $120. Vanessa rented a car for 1 day, drove it for 240 miles, and spent $80. What it wants us to do is write an equation that represents Carlos's expenses and Vanessa's expenses, then solve the system and tell what each number represents. So the nice thing about this particular equation is that it already tells us what X and Y are. So we don't have to try to figure that out. It tells us that X is the number of dollars per day and Y is the number of dollars for each mile that the car is driven. So let's go ahead and write an equation for Carlos. So the first thing it wants us to do is write an equation to represent Carlos's expenses and Vanessa's expenses. So let's go ahead and start with Carlos. We're going to do Carlos's expenses in blue here. So Carlos rented the car for 4 days, drove it 160 miles, and spent $120. Well, remember that X represents the number of dollars per day. So if Carlos rented the car for 4 days, that means we can say 4 times however many days, which so 4 times X. So we'll write Carlos's equation as 4X plus, let's focus that. It's 4X plus the number of miles. So we know that Carlos drove the car for 160 miles. So it's going to be 160 plus 160. Well, Y is how much it costs per mile. So 160Y. And then the total amount of money that Carlos spent was $120. So we're going to say that's equal to 120. Now we're going to do Vanessa's equation in red. So Vanessa rented the car for 1 day. So we're just going to say 1x. You don't have to put the 1, but you can. So she had 1x. So what for 1 day? She drove it 240 miles. So we're going to say plus 240y, because remember y is the number of the cost per mile. And altogether, Vanessa spent $80. So now we need to figure out a way to solve these systems of equations. We can just add them together. But before we add them together, what do we need to do? We need to create 0 pairs, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create 0 pairs. I don't even want to think about multiplying these big numbers. Let's look at the small ones we have, the 4x and the 1x. Which one of these can I multiply in order to create a 0 pair? Well, 1 is always an easy number to multiply. So I'm going to multiply this one, this red equation. I'm going to multiply that by -4. I want it to be 4 so that it'll cancel out with this one, and the negatives are what make it 0. So I'm going to say this whole thing times -4. So then I end up with, shh, puppy. Sorry for my pup. I'm going to multiply, let's focus that again. -4 times 1x, that's going to give me -4x. And then -4 times 240. 4 times 0 is 0. 4 times 4, I get 16. So 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So I've got negative, because negative times a positive is negative. And so I've got -4x minus 960 y equals, and then 4 times 80, -4 times 80, that is going to give me 320, but -320. And then I'm just going to bring down my original blue equation right here. So that is positive 4x plus 160y equals 120. When I add those two equations together, I end up with these 4x's canceling each other out. Negative 960 plus 160. That's going to, I've got different signs. I'll move that up a little. I've got different signs, so I'm going to subtract. So 960 minus 160 leaves me with 800 y, but I'm going to keep the sign of the larger number. And then I've got that equal to negative 320 plus 120, that is negative 200. Then I have to get rid of, I want to get rid of the, I want the y to be by itself, so I'm going to get rid of this 800 by dividing by negative 800. Divide by negative 800 on both sides. Those cancel each other out, and we're left with y equals negative and negative make a positive 200 over 800. That simplifies. Divide each one by 100. So I have y equals 2 over 8. But even further, I can divide both of those by 2. And I end up with y equals 1/4. But since we're talking about dollars, so y is the number of dollars per mile, so y is equal to 0.25, 25 cents in other words. So I still need to figure out what is my x. So I'm going to take, I could take either one of these. These mean the same thing. 1/4 is the same thing as 0.25. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to plug it back into my original equation. So I originally had, I'm going to go with the smaller one right here, 1x. I should do that in red. I had 1x plus 240y and that's equal to 80. They said that my 1x plus 240 times y is 240 times 1/4 equals 80. I can simplify this by dividing 240 by 4. So that is 60. So that's 1x plus 60 equals 80. Come here, puppy. Sorry, guys, my puppy is crying here. And then I want to get my x by itself. I don't need to say 1x, I can just say x. I can just say that x plus 60 equals 80. Subtract that 60 on both sides, and I'm left with x equals 20. So I had x was 20 and y was 0.25. Well, what did x represent? X represented how many dollars per day? So we said x, the car rental is going to be $20 per day. And the y value represented the dollars per mile driven. So that is $20 per day and 25 cents or $0.25 per mile. if I wanted to do the same thing, this time it doesn't give me a value for X and Y. So what I need to do is look at my equation. So I have a sales associate in a department store earns commission on each suit and each pair of shoes sold. 1 week, she earned $47 in commission for selling 3 suits and 1 pair of shoes. The next week, she earned $107 in commission for selling 7 suits and 2 pairs of shoes. How much commission does she earn for selling each suit and each pair of shoes? So this one we do not have what X and Y represent, but that's okay because we can still figure it out just as easily. So I'm going to write an equation that represents how much she made the first week. So in the first week, let's do that one in blue. So in week 1, she earned $47 for selling 3 suits and 1 pair of shoes. So 3 suits, I'm going to use the letter S for suits. Nope, I'm going to use X because both suits and shoes start with S. That's not going to help us. So let's go with 3X plus 1 pair of shoes, so 1Y. That's equal to $47. So she earned $47 for selling 3 suits and 1 pair of shoes. So that means we're going to have to say that X is our suits and Y is our shoes. So we've got to get a second equation here. Let's do that. So that was going to be the second week. The next week, she earned $107 for selling 7 suits and 2 pairs of shoes. So that is 7 suits, so 7X, because we said X is suits, plus 2 pairs of shoes, 2Y, because Y is shoes, and altogether she earned $107. So I need to get 0 pairs. So I'm going to multiply the top one in this case because 1 is always an easy number to multiply by because we can get it to equal anything. So I'm going to multiply it by -2. Why am I multiplying by -2? Because I'm trying to cancel out my y's. And if I multiply by -2, -2 times 1 is going to give me -2, which will give me 0 pairs here that will cancel. So what am I going to end up with? I'm going to have, when I distribute, I'm going to have -2 times 3 is going to give me -6x. And I'm going to have -2 times 1 is going to give me -2y. And then -2 times 47, that's going to give me, what is that, -94. So I'm going to add those two together, and I will end up with 7 plus -6, that gives me 1x. My 2 y's have canceled. 107 minus 94, or 107 plus -94. 7 minus 4 gives me 3. 10 minus 9 is 1, so it gives me 13. So I have that x equals 13. So I need to find what y is still. I'm going to take the original equation right here. I'm going to plug this x into the x that was here. So instead of saying 3 times x, I'm going to say 3 times 13 plus 1y, or just plus y, equals 47. Well, 3 times 13 is 39, plus y equals 47. I want to get my y by itself, so I'm going to subtract 39 on both sides. When I do that, these two cancel, and I'm left with y equals 47 minus 39 is 8. So what does that mean? Well, our sales associate, remember x represents how much she makes on suits, and y represents how much she makes on shoes. So she earns $13 for each suit sold, or per suit, and she earns $8 per pair of shoes. Hope that helps, guys.